Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall, one of, in my opinion, the best role-playing games ever made. Unfortunately, being one of the most ambitious games ever made, the original release was somewhat buggy, clunky, and hard to use. Thankfully, a team of dedicated developers have been working on a project to remaster and update Daggerfall to the modern day, and today I'm going to show you how to install that project. Whether you want the vanilla Daggerfall experience, or you want to completely remaster the game with mods, this is the tutorial for you, because today we're going to cover all of that and more. Before getting into installation, I want to cover what Daggerfall Unity is and why you should use it to play Daggerfall regardless of if you want a vanilla or modded experience. If you want to jump straight into the installation guide and skip my description of Daggerfall Unity, go ahead and jump to this point in the video. So what is Daggerfall Unity? It's an ongoing project which has remade Daggerfall within the Unity game engine. Currently, Unity is in its alpha stages of development. However, all features and content from original Daggerfall are now implemented in Unity at this point. Additionally, Unity has allowed for a huge amount of bug fixes, quality of life changes, and general ease of use changes within the game. Unity also has an incredible amount of customizability, with a huge amount of optional inbuilt settings, plus an active modding community, which has created many gameplay and graphics mods to enhance the game. However, Unity has remained extremely loyal to original Daggerfall, and so almost all of the tweaks are optional, meaning Unity is the best way to play the game, regardless of whether you want to mod the game completely, or play the game as it was originally intended minus all the bugs and clunkiness. I'm going to divide this video into 3 sections. First, we will talk about how to install Unity itself and go through some of the built-in optional settings I recommend. Next, we will go into the gameplay, role-playing, and general utility mods I recommend. Finally, we'll get into remastering the game's graphics. I'm going to put a timestamp for each section of the video in the video description, so feel free to go in the description and go through the video as you please. So the first thing that you need to do is make sure you have WinRAR or some other kind of archive opener program. I'm going to include the link to download this and everything else I talk about in the video description, so make sure to use that to find all the download links. The next thing we need to do is download something called Daggerfall Setup, which used to be the best way to play the game before Unity, and will serve as our installation of the base game. To do this, navigate to the live build section of a Daggerfall Unity website. Click the first link called Daggerfall Setup. You'll be taken to a wiki page, where you'll see a download link after a bolded word called download. The link is called Daggerfall Setup. Download that and open it up. Now, double-click the executable that you get inside the download folder. This will take you to the Daggerfall installer. Select your language, agree to the terms of use, and then set where you want Daggerfall to download. You'll need to navigate to this location later, so make sure to keep track of where you install it. I recommend letting it install to the default location. Next, you'll see a set of options for optional bug fixes and quest packs. Keep all of them checked, which should be the default selection, and hit continue to let the game install. Once Daggerfall is finished installing, uncheck the options at the end unless you want to test out the game without Unity and hit finish. We now have original Daggerfall installed with a set of bug fixes and extra quests. Next, we want to install Daggerfall Unity itself. To do this, start by going back to the live builds page of the Daggerfall Unity website. At the bottom of this page, you will see a set of download links for the current build of Unity. Note that the build listed may not match the one in this video, but that's okay. Unity is constantly being updated, so just download whatever the latest build is. The instructions in this video should continue to work. I should also note that while I think this video should work regardless of what operating system you use, I use Windows and I can only vouch that this installation process will work on Windows. Download the build corresponding to your operating system by clicking the link to the latest build and then downloading the zip file. Next, create a folder where you want to install Daggerfall Unity. I'm going to do this on my desktop. Right-click on your Daggerfall Unity installation and extract the files into the folder you just created. So just go ahead and navigate to wherever you made the folder for your Daggerfall Unity installation and extract the files in there. Open up your newly created Daggerfall Unity folder. Here you will see an executable called Daggerfall Unity. This is what we will use to open up the game. Open it up now to perform the final steps in setting up Unity. First, navigate to where you installed original Daggerfall. If you use the default path, it should be under Games, Bethesda Softworks, Daggerfall. Once you've selected the right folder, your menu should turn green and you can press OK. Next, choose your game resolution and leave the graphics settings alone for now. We can tweak all of that later. Hit Test and then OK, and you've finally successfully installed Daggerfall Unity. So now that we've successfully installed Daggerfall Unity, the next thing I want to do is just go through some of the optional settings and enhancements to the game built into Unity that I would highly recommend using. For all of these, of course, they're all optional, so feel free to, I'll explain, what each one does, but feel free to not use or use them as you please. I'll just give you the ones I recommend. So we're going to start with the settings on the default page when you open up Daggerfall Unity. The first thing I would recommend doing is turning on vertical sync and then potentially turning on swap health and fatigue. Now in classic Daggerfall, your fatigue bar is red and your health bar is green. This is a little unintuitive to some people. A lot of people are used to having their health bar be red and their fatigue bar be green. I'm personally used to the way Daggerfall has it now, but if you think that you won't be used to it, go ahead and swap them if you want your fatigue bar to be green and your health bar to be red. Invert mouse, if you want to invert your mouse look, you can turn that on. Mouth smoothing I would recommend because it just makes looking around a lot more smooth. Left-hand weapons, if you're left-handed, you might want to have them appear on the left side. Player nudity, I would recommend turning on if nudity doesn't bother you, just because I actually learned that there are certain enemies, certain quests that you actually can't access with player nudity off. And so if you want all the features of the game, you want to keep player nudity on so long as it doesn't bother you too much. Next is click to attack. Now, in classic Daggerfall, you would attack by basically holding down a key and moving your mouse back and forth to make different swings with your sword. And this was just a bit clunky and a bit unintuitive. So I personally like having click to attack on so I can just click a mouse button to automatically attack. The way that you swinged your blade didn't make an effect on the fight anyways, it was just aesthetic, so it doesn't make a difference. So I'd recommend turning this on. I'd also recommend turning on SCF font rendering. This just increases the resolution for text. So this is a good setting to have on, so I'd recommend switching that on. Next, we're going to go into the advanced settings, and we're going to start with the gameplay tab. Now, the first setting you'll see is start in dungeon under game. This will basically determine whether you start in the first dungeon of the game that you'd start in classic Daggerfall. If you're new to the game, I would definitely recommend keeping this on. If you're experienced with the game and you don't want to start in the first dungeon for whatever reason, you can turn that off. Under controls, this is personally a good setting for me in terms of mouse sensitivity, weapon sensitivity, and movement acceleration. If you can change these as you please if the sensitivity is too high or too low for you. The one setting I would recommend turning on here is bow's draw and release. Now in classic Daggerfall, you would just click basically to have your bow fire. While in, of course, later Elder Scrolls games and other RPGs, you would basically hold down your mouse to draw back your bow and then release your mouse to fire. This is more intuitive to me, and it's the way I think bows should be done in RPGs, so I personally like the setting and would recommend turning it on. I would also recommend turning on spell lighting and spell shadows. Next, we're going to go to the interface section. We're going to start in the HUD section of interface with crosshair. If you want a little crosshair in the middle of your screen, I personally like it. I'd recommend turning this on. It can actually help you in certain situations where you have to target like a small object. So I do like having this on. I also like having an arrow counter on. This will tell you how many arrows that you have when you have an arrow equipped, which is just a nice, useful little feature. So I would recommend turning that on as well. In terms of GUI, one setting that I would potentially recommend is countdown quest journal clocks. Now, in classic Daggerfall, when you get a quest, you're going to get a time limit on that quest. So, for instance, you have 25 days to do this quest. If you open up your journal, it will tell you how many days you have to do the quest total. This setting will change it so that instead of telling you the total amount of time you have to do the quest, it will tell you how much time you have left. So as time passes, it will decrease the amount of days you have left to do the quest and make it so you don't have to calculate yourself whether you'll be needing to fulfill a quest requirement soon. So this is just a nice, useful feature. I'd recommend turning it on. Another item I would recommend turning on would be inventory info panel and enhanced item lists. In classic Daggerfall, you can only see 4 items at a time, and this will greatly increase the amount of items that you can see at a time, which is just a nice feature because it was a huge pain to sort through items, 4 items at a time. So this setting is just really good. So I'd recommend turning that on. Some other settings I might recommend messing with are number 1, geographic backgrounds, which will just give you a character background based on your geographic location. That can be a nice role-playing setting to have on. Dungeon wagon access prompt. This will make it so that when you access a dungeon exit, it will ask you whether or not you want to access your wagon, which is where you store your items, or whether or not you want to actually leave the dungeon. This is a good setting just because usually when you access a dungeon exit, a lot of the time you just want to store items in your wagon. You don't want to leave the dungeon. The next setting I would recommend changing is the maximum loiter time. Now in classic Daggerfall, there's different forms of resting. There's resting and then there's loitering. When you rest, you restore your health, fatigue, and mana. Well, when you loiter, you're just passing the time. You're not really resting. And loitering is useful because in towns, for instance, unless you're staying in an inn, you can't legally rest. You can only legally loiter, which is just hanging around. And you could only loiter for 3 hours at a time in classic Daggerfall. But of course, you could just loiter for 3 hours, press a loiter button again, and then loiter for another 3 hours. So I'd recommend turning this up because it's just a pain to do it, one loitering by another session of loitering. It's nice to be able to just loiter the amount of time you need all at once. The next tab we're going to talk about is the enhancements tab. Now, if you're wanting to use mods, you definitely want to turn on mod system and asset injection. Under lighting, I would recommend turning on item-based player torch, which just basically makes it so that you can create light around you by turning on torches or lanterns or candles, which is useful for going through dark dungeons. These are personally the lighting settings that I like for my dungeons. If you find that dungeons are too dark or too bright, or that your torch doesn't give you enough light, you can tweak these settings as you like. Under the game tab, there are a ton of really good enhancements to the game here I would recommend. The first is game console. This just makes it so that you can open up a console in game. This can be useful because if you get stuck in a dungeon for some reason or there's a bug, you can teleport yourself out of the dungeon. So there's just a number of useful console commands that might come up if you got stuck for some reason somewhere or you needed to fix a bug. So I would recommend turning on the game console. Near-death warning will make the screen blink and pulsate when you're close to dying, which can be a good warning. I personally like having this on, so I'm going to keep it checked. Alternate random enemy selection will just increase the diversity and variability of enemies in dungeons. I personally think this is a welcome addition to the game. Some dungeons can be very non-diverse in the enemies that you see inside of them, so this increases, for me, the fun factor of dungeon crawling. Advanced climbing system. Now, this is a good enhancement to the game. In original Daggerfall, you could only really climb up and down. With enhanced climbing, you can basically climb in all different directions, jump off from walls, and grab onto other walls. So personally, in my opinion, just makes the climbing system better. So I'd recommend turning that on. Combat vocalizations. This will just make NPCs make sounds when they get attacked or hit. This is really just personal preference. Enemy infighting will make characters fight each other. Enemy characters fight each other. I personally have a lot of fun with this. I think it's fun when you walk into a dungeon and see a bunch of characters fighting. They won't always fight each other, but they will sometimes. So I think this is a good setting. Enhanced combat AI. This is pretty self-explanatory. It just makes the AI better than the original Daggerfall AI. Personally think that's a very good setting to have on, so I'm going to keep that on. Now, this is the one setting in the enhancements tab I wouldn't recommend turning on. Magic items can't be repaired in classic Daggerfall, and magic items are really, really OP in Daggerfall. So if you allow them to be repaired, in my opinion, that makes the game just too easy because magic items are already so good, and having them degrade is a built-in mechanism to make them a little bit less overpowered than they are in the game. So I wouldn't recommend turning this on. Instant repair services. Now, when you would go to a blacksmith in classic Daggerfall and you wanted to repair your items, you'd have to wait a certain amount of time, I think something like 48 hours before you got your items back. Instant repair services will make it so you can give the blacksmith the items and they'll be repaired instantly. Personally, I like this. I don't like having to wait the 48 hours. I can see why you might like that setting for roleplay reasons, but it's up to you whether you want to turn that on or off. And then the last setting I would recommend would be guild quest player selection. So in Daggerfall, if you go to a guild and you ask for a quest, in classic Daggerfall, you'd get a randomly generated quest from a list of the available quests from that guild that you are of a high enough rank to have access to. If you turn the setting on, rather than being given a random quest, you will get a list of all the quests that are available in the guild and you can select which one you want to do. I personally like this a lot because it allows me to easily skip through duplicate quests and choose the quest that I want to do. So I personally think this is a really good setting and I'd recommend turning it on. But again, it's up to you whether you want to do that. So that's everything for the enhancements tab. So the very last tab is the video tab. Now, if you're planning on installing graphics mods and overhauling the graphics of Daggerfall, go ahead and just leave this video tab as it is. We're going to tweak these settings a lot later. So you can just leave it as it is in the default settings and we'll change things later on. Now, if you aren't planning on installing graphics overhauls for whatever reason, you can play with this as you like. I don't think that increasing the graphics here, like adding shadows, really makes much of a performance hit, so feel free to increase the graphics a bit if you want. If for some reason the game is running slowly for you, the first settings I would change to try and fix that would be field of view, turning that down and turning off the shadows, and then of course turning the quality level down, and that should definitely make the game run if for whatever reason it's not running for you. But as I said, if you are going to install the graphics mods, go ahead and leave this empty for now, don't change it. So there is one more built-in feature to Daggerfall Unity that I would call sort of a hidden feature in a way, and it is something called experimental smaller dungeons. Now, if you didn't know, dungeons in Daggerfall can be absolutely massive. They're randomly generated, and they're randomly generated, I won't get into it too in depth, but basically based on a system of blocks where each dungeon has a certain number of blocks that can vary, and the amount of blocks determines how big it is, and then it's randomly generated from there. Now, Daggerfall Dungeon dungeons, I think, for a lot of people can just be a little bit too massive. And this setting, what it will do is it will restrict the number of blocks that the dungeon can be, the amount of blocks the dungeon can be, so that all dungeons are relatively small, similar to the size of the opening dungeon in Daggerfall. Now, when I say relatively small, these are still pretty big dungeons, and probably the sort of dungeon size you'd expect from your standard role-playing game. I personally have started using this setting, and I find that now that I'm using it, I can't go back to the giant dungeons, even though I do love to go explore giant dungeons every once in a while. So I would recommend using this setting if this sounds like the sort of thing that you'd like and you'd like to avoid the absolutely massive dungeons. And sometimes finding quest objectives in randomly generated massive dungeons can be a huge pain. Now, in order to actually find this, you need to go to users slash what your username is. Mine's Sebas. Then you go to app data, local low, Daggerfall Workshop, Daggerfall Unity, and then something called settings.ini. Now the problem is that sometimes this like pathway can be hidden in terms of finding it, so you can always search settings.ini and find it that way. Once you actually find it, what you need to do is scroll down. You can actually do Control F and search for dungeon, and you'll find if you go down to, let's see where it is, smaller dungeon. Let's see. If we go up one, smaller dungeon. Now yours will be set to false. Mine's set at true. If you just delete false and then change it to true and then file save, you'll have experimental smaller dungeons on. Now, one thing to note about this is it won't change the main quest dungeons because those weren't entirely randomly generated, so those will still be much bigger than your average dungeon. So this is a setting in general I'd recommend, so feel free to turn it on if you want. Okay, so at this point, we've made all the tweaks that I'd recommend to the base of Daggerfall Unity. So if you want to basically play the vanilla game with those few enhancements, then you're pretty much done at this point. The game's ready to play, so go ahead and play it if you want. At this point, what we're going to do is move on to installing mods. And as I said at the start of the video, the first thing that we're going to do is talk about gameplay, role-playing, or utility mods, not graphics mods. So I'm going to go through all of the gameplay mods I would recommend. Now, there's a few things we should talk about before we get into modding. The first thing is that because we're going to be doing modding, you might want to go ahead and make a character in the game, just a test character to make sure that the mods work. And you probably want to put that character outside, not in the starting dungeon, because there's some mods that you need to be outside to test. So in order to do this, you could do two things. One, you could go to the advanced settings and turn off start in dungeon for now. Press play and then make a character and they should start outside. Or you can just go into the game and then use a console command, which is tele2exit, to teleport to the dungeon exit after you spawn in the starter dungeon, and then make a save outside. So either way, make a character, and every few mods that we talk about, you may want to just test out your game just to make sure it's still stable and that the mod seems to be working. Now, another thing I want to say with regards to mods is that I'm going to go through all the mods that I personally recommend and use, and then optional mods that for whatever reason I don't use or I haven't tested out yet. And I can vouch 100% that if you install all the mods that I recommend, they do work together. They do seem to be stable with relatively few bugs or crashes and work. If you want to install mods that I don't use, I can't 100% vouch that those mods will be compatible with all the mods that I recommend. That being said, Daggerfall Unity does seem to be fairly stable in terms of modding overall, so it's unlikely, I think, that if you installed some of these extra optional mods, it would have much of an effect on your game performance or on, the game stability. But I just wanted to say, heads up, that all the mods I recommend that are optional, I can't 100% vouch for them working because I don't personally use them. The first mod that I would recommend installing is Daggerfall Unity Quest Pack 1. This is a mod that just adds a ton of new content to the game in the form of quests for both guilds and NPCs, and personally it's one of my favorite, if not my favorite, gameplay mods. To download this, it's very simple. Go to the link in the description, click download here, and this will take you to a Nexus Mods page, which, by the way, you'll need a Nexus Mods form account, which is pretty easy to set up in order to download mods off here. You'll scroll down to Files, and then you will click Manual Download under DFU Quest Pack 1. And then you'll click Slow Download, assuming that you're not a premium member of Nexus Mods, and the mod should download from there. Once it's downloaded, what you're going to do is open up your Daggerfall Unity folder. You're going to navigate to Daggerfall Unity Data into Streaming Assets, and this is where we'll install most of the mods in the game. You'll open up DFU Quest Pack 1 in your Archive Manager, and then you'll take QP1 and you'll drag it into your Quest Pack folder. So just take QP1 and drag and drop it right into your Quest Pack folder, and that's it. It's installed. The next mod that I would recommend installing is called Warm Ashes. Now, Warm Ashes is basically a random event generator, and what it does is it creates a ton of random events that happen around dungeon exteriors and are also in villages and towns, and it just adds a ton of new content to the game. It does make the game just slightly harder, but I personally think the difficulty is worth it, and I'd recommend it even if it's your first time playing Daggerfall. Now, to install Warm Ashes, what you want to do is scroll down, and under Warm Ashes version 3, you'll see a download for Warm Ashes. Go ahead and hit that, and then click download. Once your download has completed, you'll just click on it and you'll open it up and you'll see two folders, one called Quest Packs and one called Quests. In the Quest Packs folder, you'll find a folder called Kamer. Go ahead and just drag the Kamer folder into your Quest Packs folder, just like that. And then in terms of the quests, go ahead and take these, go into your streaming assets, go to your quest folder in your Daggerfall folder, and copy all of these quests into the quest folder inside of your streaming assets folder, and that's it. It's installed. Now, I'm aware that the author of Warm Ashes is currently working on making a fourth version of Warm Ashes, and once he does that, you'll install this in a slightly different way. You'll go to under mods and you'll drag Warm Ashes in there, but for now, this is the way that you do it. Now, once you have installed Warm Ashes and once you've installed the Daggerfall Quest Pack, in order to initialize them, you have to start a new game. And once you start a new game, once you get into the starter dungeon, it will say Daggerfall Quest Pack 1 initialized. And then for Warm Ashes, it will ask you, there's 6 different modules of Warm Ashes, each for a different kind of dungeon exterior. And it will ask you if you want to initialize them. I recommend turning them all on. And again, this will happen when you first start a new character. There's also a guide on the forum page on how to initialize Warm Ashes for a currently existing character, but I'm not going to get into that. So you can read about that if you want to do that. The next gameplay mod I'd highly recommend is Villager Immersion Overhaul. This is basically a mod that adds a lot more variability in the NPCs that you'll see at villages. In classic Daggerfall, you saw basically just the same sprites walking around. This adds a huge new variety of sprites, from warriors on horses to wagons and carts to different races. It also adjusts the amount of NPCs in each location so that there's more NPCs in cities and only a few NPCs in small towns, in addition to making guards wander the streets of Daggerfall at night. I think this is a fantastic mod that really adds to the roleplay aspect of Daggerfall. I'd highly recommend it. So in order to download this, go ahead and just go to the link, click download Villager Immersion Overhaul version 4, and then download it from MediaFire. Once you have it downloaded, you're just going to open up the WinRAR file, and then you'll see 3 different folders depending on what system you use. We're using Windows, so we're going to go under Windows. We'll go to Daggerfall Unity mods, and then you're going to go ahead and drag the villager immersion.df mod file right into your mods folder right here. And that's all you have to do. The next gameplay mod I'd recommend is the loading screen mod. This will make it so that whenever you load a game, you'll get this nice loading screen. It's very Skyrim-esque with your level in the top right-hand corner, a random fact or tip in the bottom right, and then a picture on the left-hand side. You can also choose if you prefer Oblivion-style loading screens. You can do that too. I personally like the Skyrim-style loading screen, but if you do want the Oblivion-style background, you can choose this link right here. If you want the Skyrim-style background, click on loading screen on Nexus Mods. This will take you to Nexus Mods. You'll go to Files, and then you can download whichever system you have. I have Windows, so I'm going to click Manual Download under Windows, and then you'll actually download the mod. And once it's downloaded, you'll just do what you've been doing, which is essentially to go into your folder, go into the section titled Mods, take loadingscreen.df mod and just drag it into your mods folder under streaming assets in your Daggerfall Unity installation. The next gameplay mod I would recommend is the Roleplay and Realism mod pack, which actually has a bunch of different game enhancement modules that add certain roleplay features to the game, and I'll go through what they do and which ones I recommend. Now, to actually install it, what you're going to do is go ahead and scroll down here to Releases, and then click on this link under Nexus Mods. This will take you to the installation page. You'll go to Files. You will download the newest version of Roleplay Realism. And then you'll get the file, and you'll just do what you've been doing. Drag the d.df mod file into your streaming assets mods folder as so. And then we're going to actually want to open Daggerfall Unity to choose which modules we want for the Roleplay and Realism mod pack. So once you've opened up Daggerfall Unity, go ahead and click on mods, and on the left hand side you'll see the mods we've installed minus the mods that went into the quest pack folder. These will only the .df mod files will appear here. Go to your Roleplay Realism mod and click on Settings, and here's a list of all the modules. The first module is bed sleeping. This makes it so that when you click on beds you can rest in them, which I think is a good setting. I'd recommend turning it on. Advanced Archery makes it so that the damage that you do with your bow depends on how long you hold down and draw and release your bow. I think this is a great addition to the game. I'd recommend turning it on. Enhanced Riding greatly improves horseback riding in terms of both presentation and also the ability to sprint on your horse. And when sprinting on your horse, you can accidentally run over villagers and also hit enemies for damage. This is another part of role-playing realism which I highly like and would recommend turning it on. Encumbrance effects basically gives you penalties when you're carrying too much weight. This is a good roleplay feature. Personally, because I'm constantly at max capacity because I like to pick up loot, I don't like turning this on because I don't like the encumbrance effects, but you can turn that on if you want. Bandaging just basically creates an item called bandages that you can use, and you can buy them in stores, use them to heal yourself. Nice little setting. I'd recommend turning it on. Ship ports makes it so that you can only board your own personal ship, and yes, you can buy a ship in Daggerfall when you are at a port city. Again, I think this makes sense. I'd recommend turning it on. Underworld Expulsion makes it so that you can get expelled from guilds like the Thieves Guild and the Dark Brotherhood if you do stuff to piss them off. A good roleplay feature. It's a bit harsh for me, so I don't like having it on, but it's up to you. Climbing restriction makes it so you can't climb when you have a weapon drawn. I like climbing with my weapon drawn, so I don't like turning this one on. The next one's weapon speed. This basically just makes it so that how fast you use your weapon is affected by your speed stat. This makes sense to me, so I like this. The next one is equip damage. This basically makes it so that your equipment will take damage from enemies, and this will affect its condition. Again, this is up to you if you want to turn this on. The last one is enemy appearance. This will basically make it so that the NPCs in Daggerfall have clothing better fitting what their class is. So you'll see warriors with swords and helmets, and you'll see mages only really with staves and cloaks. I think this is a really good part of the module that I would recommend keeping on. And then finally, this is just settings for enhanced riding. This will basically make it so that the terrain that you're on will affect the view and appearance of how you're riding your horse. I like this setting. I'd recommend turning it on. So that's all of the modules for roleplay and realism. Now, the next mod that we're going to install is just basically a very small supplementary feature to the roleplay and realism mod. It's called Helmet Swap. Now, in the enemy appearance redux module of roleplay and realism, it makes it so that warriors will sometimes have on helmets with basically horns on them. This will make it so that only barbarians have horned helmets, while warriors have armor more in line with a warrior or a knight type class. I personally think this is a good little tweak, so I'd recommend installing Helmet Swap. Now, there's two versions of Helmet Swap, depending on whether or not you're going to be using the graphics overhaul we talk about later. If you're not sure yet, you can install this later, but if you know you're going to install the graphics overhaul, which obviously I'm going to use, then download the Dream version. If you're not going to install the graphics overhaul, just download the default version. But either way, the setup's going to be the same once you install it. It's the same as all the other mods. All you have to do is go ahead and drag and drop it into Streaming Assets mods. You'll get a .df mod file that you'll essentially drag right in there. So just open it up. We'll go to mods, go to Helmet Swap Dream, and drag it right in there. The next gameplay mod I'd recommend is Persistent Dungeons. This is a mod that will make it so that when you exit a dungeon and then re-enter it, the enemies that you killed in the dungeon will stay dead. In classic Daggerfall, the enemies will reset. I personally think it's a lot better when they actually stay dead. So go ahead and hit download. I already did download it. It will just automatically download the DF mod file and drag it right into your mods folder, and that's it for that one. The next mod that I would recommend is Taverns Redone. Now, I'm not sure if this counts as a graphics or gameplay mod, but I'm going to put it in the gameplay section because it's not really going to have a huge performance hit on your game. Basically, what it does is it redoes the taverns within Daggerfall to just look a lot better with paintings on the walls, just a new and very good looking design. I'd highly recommend this. It hasn't redone all the taverns, so some taverns will still be default, but it has redone a pretty sizable chunk of them where you'll notice the improvement in taverns a lot with this particular mod. So with this one, we'll have to go to Nexus Mods, and we'll just follow the same procedure we've been following in terms of downloading it. It will be a DF mod file that you'll just drag right in to your mods folder. The next gameplay mod I'd recommend is Daggerfall Sky Shards. Now, Sky Shards basically places these shards that have this big blue light coming up from them in some particular places throughout the Daggerfall region. I'm not sure if they're entirely randomly generated. They certainly often appear at important landmarks, and when you collect enough of these, you'll get one free, basically, point in one of your attributes. I think this basically improves the exploration aspect of the game. I've definitely had a lot of fun trying to find these, so I think it's a great addition to the game, and I would highly recommend getting this one. So go ahead and go to Files. This is also just another very easy mod to download. It's just a .df mod file. The next mod I'd recommend, which is sort of a utility mod, is Convenient Clock. It will basically place a clock in the lower right-hand side of the screen that will tell you what the current time is or the day is. There's 6 different options for the sort of clock that the clock style that you can use. So it's very customizable. You can also change the color of it, where it is placed exactly. So this is just a really good mod. So we'll follow the same procedure for downloading this one as all the other mods. Now there is one thing to say about this mod, which is that depending on if you're going to use the graphics overhaul, you might need to use a preset set of settings, and you might not have access to all of the different types of clocks that you can use when you customize the settings of this mod. So if you're planning on using the graphics overhaul, we'll adjust the settings of this later. If not, feel free to go into the settings of this mod in your Daggerfall Unity mod section and choose which style of clock you would prefer. Now, the last gameplay mod that I personally use and I recommend is called No Rush Main Quest. Now, what No Rush Main Quest does is it makes it so that with regards to the main quests, there are no longer quest timers, so you don't have to do any of the main quests in a certain amount of time. In classic Daggerfall, certain sequences within the main quest would require you to do actions within a certain period of time. Now, the reason you might want this is just because, personally, I would like to play through the main quest a little bit at a time, and I don't want to have to do it all at once. I like to be able to take my time and do everything else without worrying about something running out in terms of the main quest. So if that sounds like something that you would like to do and that would bother you if it wasn't in the game, all you have to do is go ahead and download this. We'll install it in a little bit different way from the other things we've been downloading. We're actually going to go into the quest folder. We're going to open up No Rush Main Quest. We're going to go into quests, and then we're going to highlight everything except for this first text document. And we're going to drag and drop this into our quest folder, and then we'll replace all the files in the destination. So this is just replacing all of the main quest quests so that none of them have timers, so you can get them done in any amount of time that you'd like. So now at this point, we've gone through all the mods that I'm personally using at the moment in my Let's Play. So now I just want to shout out some of the gameplay mods I'm not using for whatever reason, but that you may want to check out and potentially install. So the first one of these is called Tedious Travel, which is probably one of the most popular mods. And what Tedious Travel does is it gets rid of the fast travel system in Daggerfall. Now you'd think that's crazy because Daggerfall is so big, how could you ever possibly travel by foot or by horse from one place to another? And the way Tedious Travel does it, as you can see in this picture, is it allows you to move at a very, very fast speed towards the location you want to travel to. Now I think this is a really good mod that has a great roleplay addition to the game. The main reason I don't use it is because I found that it's very glitchy if you're using a graphics overhaul mod and a lot of graphics mods, so that it's hard to make yourself go the speed that you need to go to get to places in a reasonable time. And so I would be wary of using this if you're going to install a bunch of graphics mods as well. That being said, if you are interested in this, it is a really great popular mod, and one thing to keep in mind when you install it is that it takes something like 2 minutes to initialize when you first load a save after installing it, so don't think your game crashed if you did install it. The next mod I want to talk about is a mod called Meteor Monsters, which has basically changed the stats of different animal NPC enemies inside of Daggerfall to become more realistic. So certain enemies have gotten debuffs, like rats and spiders, and then animals like werewolves, bears, and mummies have gotten buffs. This is actually a mod I've been planning on incorporating into my Let's Play. I just haven't used it at the current moment, so I think it should probably not be incompatible with any of the other mods we're using, and it's something that you should potentially check out. The next mod I want to shout out is Climate and Cloaks, which essentially is a weather mod that changes, makes you have different conditions based on the weather that you're in. So if you're really cold or you're wet, it will give you a potential debuff, and it also adjusts the debuffs or your endurance to certain kinds of weather depending on your race. So for instance, Nords might be better in the cold and things like that. This potentially makes the game a bit harder, and that's the main reason I don't use it, but it is definitely a very popular mod, and it's similar to mods that you can find for Oblivion and Skyrim too. So it's another mod I wanted to shout out. The next mod I wanted to shout out is the Loot Realism mod pack. This just rebalances the way that you get loot in the game, so certain things are more expensive, and then loot makes more sense, so the loot you get from certain enemies is different, and the loot you get from certain locations is different. This again can make the game a lot harder, so recommended for more hardcore players of Daggerfall, maybe not for someone first starting the game out. The next mod I want to shout out is called Airships. Basically just adds purchasable airships to the game, which is just really awesome. This is a mod I've been meaning to incorporate into my Let's Play at some point, so definitely install this one if it sounds interesting to you. And then the last gameplay mod I want to shout out is Decorator, which basically just lets you decorate the interior of your purchased houses and ships. Again, another mod that I'm not using at the moment, but I do want to start using at some point. So again, these are all optional mods. Can't 100% vouch that they'll be compatible with the mods that I recommend, but I think they probably should, so feel free to install any of these that you'd like. Now, if you go to the Daggerfall Unity forums, you'll see that there's a whole list in the released mods section. I'm sorry I couldn't shout out every single mod that exists. This video is already going to be very long, and I can't just go through every one, so feel free to go through. There's other gameplay mods I didn't shout out, so I'm sorry about that, but again, I can't go through every mod in existence. So, without further ado, let's move into the graphics overhaul part of the video. Okay, so hold your breath, we're almost there. Now we're going to install the graphics overhaul mods. Now, the core of the graphics overhaul we're going to install is something called KOW Dream, and this is just an amazing project, which has totally remastered Daggerfall in terms of all the textures from, the menus in the start a new game screen, all the way to all of the different dungeons, interiors, houses, outdoors. Everything has been just completely remastered to look great. It also has, I think, sound, clean sound and remastered audio and music as well. So it's just a fantastic mod. It's really big and intense, and you can just see some of the screenshots here. These are actually out of date now. The mod looks even better now, but you can just see how much better the game looks with this mod installed, and the footage I was showing you at the start of the video was all with Dream installed. Now, just to be clear, I want to show you the recommended specs for this particular mod. So you might want to just check if you have these specs, because it can be a little bit performance intensive. That being said, if you do want to install this mod, all you're going to do is go ahead and scroll down to the bottom here to the download mirror. You're going to open this up in Nexus Mods, and this is a pretty big download, so it might take you a little bit of time to download it. But just choose the Dream download for your system. As you can see, it's 2.1 gigabytes. Hit manual download and wait for it to install. Okay, so once Dream finally downloads, you're going to open up the WinRAR file, and you'll see a bunch of folders here, and this is a little bit more in depth of an installation than we've been used to so far. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is go into the mods folder, and you'll see a whole bunch of mods, and you'll just go into the mods folder of your Daggerfall Unity folder and drag and drop all of these mods right into your Streaming Assets mods folder. So once everything's extracted, we're going to go ahead and just drag this folder called Presets right into our Streaming Assets folder, just like this. And then the next thing we're going to do is go into our Spellcons folder, and we're going to copy everything in there into the Spellcons folder here in our Daggerfall Unity folder. So that's all you have to do to install Dream, but there's another feature to Dream which is called the Reshade. And in the author's own words, if you scroll down here in the text file, the Dream Reshade basically sharpens textures and sprites. It uses a superior anti-aliasing to the one present in the game, and it adds a quality flare to the sun. So in order to install the Dream Reshade, what you need to do is go into the Dream Reshade folder and go ahead and open up Dream Reshade. This is an application, so you just open up the executable. So once the Dream Reshade has opened, you're going to select a game to install or uninstall from, and then you're just going to navigate to your desktop or wherever you have Daggerfall Unity installed, and you're going to go into your latest installation of Daggerfall Unity, and you're going to select your Daggerfall Unity.exe and just open it, and then you're going to hit Direct 3D 10, 11, and 12, and then you're going to hit Yes, and it will go ahead and download. And you're going to keep these all checked, hit OK. and then you're done. So you can go ahead and hit X. The next thing you need to do is drag your dreamreshade.ini into your Daggerfall Unity folder, the folder with the .exe. So it should be in the same folder as your .exe for Daggerfall Unity. And now the next thing you need to do is actually open up Daggerfall Unity to configure the reshade. So once you open up Daggerfall Unity, you'll see at the top here, reshade 4.5.2.748, and you'll see reshade is now successfully installed. Press home to start the tutorial. So you'll go ahead and press home. You'll press continue. You'll press continue. And then here you'll see a list of options for the different shaders that you could use potentially. And the ones that you're going to want to select are going to be Adaptive Sharpen, and then you're also going to select Clarity. So you go ahead and select both of those, and then you'll hit Continue. And then you will hit Finish. And then you'll hit Performance Mode, and make sure that both are selected. And that's it. So you can go ahead and press home, and that will remove that window, and you now have the Dream Reshade installed. You can mess with the settings and check more of these if you want. These are the two that I generally use, but you can press them, and while they're in game, you'll see the effect the second you press them. So just make sure to have performance mode checked, and that is it for configuring the reshade. As a quick addendum to the reshade, I just realized that you should also turn on SMAA, which is the anti-aliasing used in the reshade, so make sure to turn that on as well. So now that we have Dream with the reshade installed, we needed to configure some things within our mod settings. The first thing you want to do is go to Convenient Clock, go to Settings, go to Presets, and then click on Dream and hit Load. This will configure Convenient Clock so that it actually works with the built-in Dream settings. Now, if you would prefer to use a 12-hour clock with AM and PM rather than military time, then I would recommend checking this setting. I personally actually like to use this. And you'll just see a small, basically in the bottom right-hand corner, it will tell you what the time is and what the day of the week is. Note that you can also use this option on the far right in addition to this one. Either one of these will work with Dream, and I personally like this one best. So we'll save that. The next thing you need to do is make sure that your Dream Sprites is above Helmet Swap inside the mod list. So make sure Dream Sprites is above Helmet Swap as you see here. The second thing you need to do is make sure that Villager Immersion Overhaul is below Dream Commoners. So as you can see here, Villager Immersion Overhaul is below Dream Commoners. Make sure that that is the load priority in terms of mods, or else you'll have problems and you'll see giant villagers walking around. Okay, so now that we have Dream installed, we're going to install a bunch of supplementary graphics mods that just continue to improve the graphics of the game. The first mod we're going to install is Enhanced Sky. Now, Enhanced Sky just basically creates a really great night and day skybox system with really, really good looking skies. Now, some people actually prefer the classic look, so I'll put up the classic look, a video of the classic look briefly, and you can compare that with the screenshots you see here to see which you prefer. I personally really like Enhanced Sky, so go ahead and choose the newest version. And this will bring you to a Google Drive file, and go ahead and download that. Once that's downloaded, we're going to drag the folder into our Daggerfall Unity Streaming Assets Mods folder. Again, make sure to use the version of the DF mod that corresponds to your operating system. Just go ahead and drag it right in. Next, we're going to install something called Birds in Daggerfall. Very self-explanatory, just puts nice flying birds up in the skies of Daggerfall. You'll download Birds in Daggerfall 2.0, you'll open it up, you'll go to Standalone Windows, and you'll drag in the DF mod file. Next up, we're going to download something called Distant Terrain. Now, Distant Terrain basically greatly increases the terrain view distance in Daggerfall Unity, and makes you be able to see for a lot farther away. So again, pretty simple. We're going to go ahead and download it and open it up and drag in the DF mod file. Next up, we're going to download something called Hand-Painted Model Replacement Project. Now, this is a set of .df mod files that basically has created model replacements for certain things in Daggerfall, like tables, pianos, chairs, things like that. And as you can see, there's a great improvement in the visual appearance of these models. So this is a really, really great mod, and to install it, all you're going to do is go to the latest download link, which is actually on the Nexus mod page right here. And you'll follow your typical procedure for downloading mods on Nexus Mods. Once the hand-painted models replacement mod has downloaded, you will open up the file and you will drag in everything except for the README into your mods folder within Daggerfall Unity. The next mod we will install is Post-Processing Effects Customizer, which just basically gives you a lot of customizability with regards to graphic settings, and it works very well with Dream. And we're going to go ahead and install the latest post-processing effects mod download. And this is, again, you'll just go into not docs, this is the text document, but mods, and drag this straight into your mods folder. The next mod we're going to download is Improved Interior Lighting, which, as the name implies, just improves lighting within interiors and improves torch lighting, things like that. To download it, you simply click on the file right here. It's a very small file, and then you drag the DF mod right into your mods folder. The next mod to download is Real Grass 2. Now, Real Grass 2, as you can see from the images here, just adds in this really nice, real-looking grass into Daggerfall. And it comes with another mod called Vibrant Wind. And Vibrant Wind will make it so that there's wind dependent on the weather in Daggerfall, and it will make the grass blow in the wind at a speed determined by the current weather. So in a storm, the grass will blow a lot faster, and when the weather is mild, the grass won't blow very much. So to get Real Grass and Vibrant Wind, just go ahead and go to Real Grass on Nexus Mods, go to Files, and download Real Grass, and then go into Optional Files, and download Vibrant Wind as well. So first we'll download Real Grass. And now we're going to go to Vibrant Wind, and we're going to download that one as well. So now that we have both installed, we're going to open up Real Grass, and we're going to go ahead and drag realgrass.df mod right into the mods folder, and we're going to do the exact same thing for Vibrant Wind. Okay, so the next mod that we're going to install is just a very minor graphics mod. It just basically changes your health, fatigue, and mana bars to look a bit better. As you can see, there's two different styles. There's this first style here, and then there's this second style here. Now, go ahead and download both of the files, and open up this file right here. And you'll see a folder called Textures. If you go ahead and open up Textures, you'll see a folder called Image. Just go ahead and drag and drop the Image folder into your Textures folder. Now, this will have the first three vital images in your Daggerfall, but if you want to use these second three, just go ahead and open up the second one, and whichever one you want to replace, just go ahead and drag and drop it in to replace it. Now, I personally prefer all three of these, so I'm going to go ahead and drag all three of them in and replace them. So now I have the second set rather than the first set, but you can mix and match as you see fit. Now, the very last graphics mod I'm going to be talking about today is Trees of Daggerfall. Now, Trees of Daggerfall is a pretty intense performance intensive mod that makes some of the 2D sprite trees in Daggerfall 3D. So it takes these sprites and it makes them fully 3D, and I'm going to put up some video of what that looks like. Now, these trees look amazing. Currently, there's only one set done, so the temperate woodland set is done, but the winter trees are not done yet, so you won't see the 3D trees everywhere, only the trees that have been finished. Now, I would highly recommend this mod. It's a really good mod. That being said, it does create a lot of performance requirements on your game. I could tell that my loading times into regions with 3D trees were increased, and I lagged slightly when I installed this. I personally have a good enough system to handle it, but if you install this and you're finding that your performance isn't working well, this would be the first mod that I would target to get rid of to see if that improves your performance. I'd also just take the time now to say that if you're having problems with the performance after installing all these mods, if removing Trees of Daggerfall doesn't improve performance, the mods I would target after that would be Distant Terrain, and then after that, the Dream mod itself. So if you do want to install this mod, go ahead and click version 1.0. And once Trees of Daggerfall has downloaded, go ahead and go into the Windows folder of it, and take the DF mod folder, go into your mods, and drag Trees of Daggerfall right into your mods, and you have it installed. So now you have successfully installed Dream and all the supplementary graphics mods that come along with it. Now we're almost done, but there's a few more things we have to do. The first thing we have to do is actually go inside Daggerfall Unity and make some changes. Now you can see that the author of the Dream mod has given some recommended in-game advanced settings. So just make sure that you have the settings that they recommend. So go to Gameplay Interface Enhancement and make these changes. Go to your video settings and make these changes, and make sure that in the post-processing mod, these changes are made. Now there's a quick way to do this particular part, but this part up here, you'll have to do all this by hand. And then also, there's some changes that the author recommends for the NVIDIA control panel. To do those, you just right-click on your desktop, hit NVIDIA control panel, and once it loads up, you're going to go to Manage 3D Settings, and that you can see here that you can change your settings so that they match the recommended settings here. Now, the next thing we're going to do is actually open up Daggerfall Unity and do a few things in there. So within Daggerfall Unity, we just need to configure some of our mods so that they work with Dream. And the way to do this is pretty easy. All you do is click on the mod, you click on Settings, you click on Presets, and you hit Dream and hit Load, and then you hit Save. And make sure to do that for all the mods that have a Dream preset. So those mods are going to be Birds in Daggerfall, Loading Screen, Distant Terrain, Enhanced Sky, Improved Interior Lighting, and then post-processing, as there's the manual settings. You can actually just go here and hit Dream with Reshade, hit Load, and then save that. And then do that for Real Grass 2 and Vibrant Wind. And once you've done that and loaded the preset for all of these mods, then you will be done configuring Dream, and we are finally done with the graphics section of this tutorial. Well, we're finally there. You finally made it, so congratulate yourself. You now have fully overhauled the graphics and gameplay of Daggerfall, and you've done it all within the Unity engine, so you're going to have the best possible experience you could have with this game in 2020. So thank you all for your patience. This was a super long and hard video to make, so I'd really appreciate if you hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if it helped you. I put a lot of time into this, and I know it ended up being really long, but I just wanted to make it as detailed as possible and explain everything so that there was no misunderstandings. And now hopefully, if anyone ever asks ever again about how to download Daggerfall Unity, just direct them to this video, and hopefully this will be an in-depth enough guide so that anyone, no matter their experience with modding, can do it, as I think it's very, very easy to do. So enjoy Daggerfall Unity, thanks again, and I'll catch you all next time.